I am Wes Helms. I'm with our Watson organization, and I've been working with our Watson technology since actually even before we had a Watson group, working on behalf of one of my clients as they started to investigate what AI could do. And before that, in IBM, I was actually brought into IBM as part of our e-business group, trying to convince insurance carriers to get on the internet. That was fun to get things started. But the statement there at the beginning about creating value with innovative technologies, first and foremost, no matter what you hear today regarding all the interesting, cool, and compelling things that you can do with AI, I think back to another event that I spoke at, and we had a Q&A session, and somebody was asking, how can I tell the difference between hype and fake AI and real AI? And it's a really simple, non-technical answer. Does the thing do something that's of value to you or your customers, or does it not? As much as I would want you to use Watson to do all kinds of cool and innovative things, that's really the last answer that you need to have before you make a decision to embark on a journey with AI. And that is, how are you going to create value with it? Nobody interacts with a bot because it's a bot. They interact with a bot because they need to reset their password, or they want to buy something, or they want to interact with something that they've already done with you from a customer service perspective. And so when you think about it from that perspective, I'll talk to you a little bit about our experience using AI and what exactly Watson is. But in the end, that's the key thing to think about. What's that business outcome, and how are you going to achieve it? And if AI is a sledgehammer and all you need is a ball peen hammer, use something else and find a way to create that value. But I think it's my job, my boss probably wants me to say that AI is going to be the right tool for the job. But let's evaluate it ourselves. So my first few slides here, they're kind of motherhood and apple pie. By the end of the day, you're going to be like, okay, already, we get it. And based on the poll results, I think that most of the folks in the room are already started on this journey, or they certainly get the idea that, especially in customer care and customer engagement is the biggest area that IBM sees in terms of interaction with our AI capabilities with Watson. But if we think about some of the reasons, 25% say they would pay more for better quality. That's the reason why we're all walking around with iPhones when we could get a much less expensive product from any of the many Android manufacturers. One of the reasons is the perception of quality. And then 62% of customers will consider switching after one or two bad experiences. And that's certainly the case in my personal experience. It's been my experience as I've dealt with customer service issues. Before I worked with the Watson Group, I was a client executive with one of our very large insurance carrier clients. When we started the relationship, frankly, there had been a few bad customer experiences. And that journey to rectify those customer experiences is certainly valuable, but it's a lot better to not irritate your client rather than to find a way to recover with your client. And we can talk about some of the ways that AI can help with that, both in terms of creating a great experience, but then also trying to find a way to help you protect your reputation or find ways to engage clients that otherwise might have been turned off by a prior experience. And then the most important thing, I think, from an AI perspective, from a customer self-service perspective, is this expectation on the part of consumers, 64% of consumers, expecting that they're going to get a real-time response no matter when they contact a brand, no matter what channel they contact that brand in. So nothing's more frustrating than calling in after work, as one of the examples was earlier, to deal with a billing situation only to find out that the billing organization isn't available and there's no other means to interact with that firm. So by giving customers the ability to interact wherever and whenever they want to interact with you is one of the compelling reasons to get involved in the customer self-service side of the use cases that you can apply AI with from a bot perspective. So I'm hoping that you guys get these slides later because I'm not reading all of these. By the way, I inherited this deck from one of my colleagues, but there's some interesting facts on here that I think are compelling reasons why, again, motherhood and apple pie, why we should be talking about AI in this space to begin with. Some of the keys that I wanted to highlight. we talked about the scarcity of resources, but then we also need to think about it's $4,000 just to go hire another person on average into a contact center, plus another $4,800 to train them. And so by making sure that you're enabling your customer service representatives to do the best possible job and to have the highest possible job satisfaction, you're going to cut some of the cost associated with training them by giving them tools that make it more intuitive to find information and to be able to be responsive to that customer. You're also going to increase the job satisfaction of those employees. So when you're looking at turnover, one of the things that we see in the field is that organizations that have the best tools are the ones that keep the people. And one of the things that we've seen, one of the examples I'll talk about later, both Autodesk and Royal Bank of Scotland, two of the examples I've got in my presentation, their customer service representatives are actually reporting their own satisfaction to have increased. That they have more time available to interact with their customers on the things that involve their creativity and their expertise. By two reasons. One, using AI tools to make it easier for them to do the research to answer those tough questions. And two, taking the important to answer but not valuable to have a human answer types of questions off of their plate. Nobody gets into the business of customer service to help people reset passwords. And nobody wants to be on the phone with a customer just biting their tongue saying, you know, if you just look this up on the web, you'd be able to answer this question yourself. I've got other customers that I need to talk to, they're going to buy something from you or whatever. So increasing the customer satisfaction is not just your external customers, you also have to think about your employees. And we're in a highly competitive environment in terms of getting the best people. And as AI comes in and takes some of the less valuable work off the plates of people in your contact center, you're going to have to really be hiring even better people that have a different skills profile than somebody that is capable of answering the phone and saying hi and mentioning your customer's name, your company's name. So that's one thing I wanted to put out there. Customer service, bad customer service, I think we all understand it's going to cost money. One of the other things that's important here is as we get down to messaging, 70% of consumers are reporting that they prefer messaging. That's all types of messaging, real-time chat, as well as bots. But that's one of the key things that they want to do. And lots of reasons. The example of one person wanting to interact with a bot because they don't want people understanding what they're talking about. They don't want to talk to one of their neighbors. We find in financial services, for example, that number is even higher for certain types of interactions because they want to investigate this information on their own and they want to educate themselves a little bit before they get on the phone with a financial advisor and feel that they're put into a situation where they don't know enough to ask the right questions. So that's one thing. And then when you get down to the millennials, 1 in 3 millennials are reporting that they would rather deal with a chatbot, that the chatbot is going to give them better tech support than if they call into a customer service desk. I think we've all called into a customer service desk or been in a sales situation where we do know more than the person that we're talking to. Or the disastrous situation where you go through the process of attempting to self-serve, or you've talked to them in the past and you have to start from scratch every time. Some of these things are definitely things that we can impact with AI. Others are just bread and butter customer care and CRM, customer contact center technology implementation, things that can be enabled by these technologies. So the last one that I want to point out on this eye chart here is 61% of failed customer service calls could have been solved with better access for data. And there's another number that I have in here, a similar number, that only 16% of customer service failures is the root cause ever identified and analyzed. And so when you think about that, it's not just about applying a bot to assist customer service by allowing you to have that interaction with an AI bot to answer some questions. It's also about using these technologies to better understand what's actually happening in the contact center. What are people telling you about your brand? Where are the business opportunities that are embedded in the things that people have told you in that customer care center? One of the things that I actually ran a call center way back in my career. One of my favorite ways to know that we had a successful resolution of tech support calls was one of the first things we would ask was, is it plugged in? And if they hung up, we considered that to be a successful resolution. But one of the things that shocks me is we're all recording the calls in the contact center. We're not listening to many of those calls. We're not transcribing those calls. We're not analyzing those calls. And so we've got all this information locked up that it's going to be possible to gain information from, especially with natural language processing and the ability to train one of these systems to understand a particular linguistic domain. So there's opportunity left on the table. And even though this is a wave that is accelerating, there are still plenty of opportunities just to raise the bar on some of these basic entry points before we get to the place where we're training the bots to negotiate and some of the other things that are coming down the road. But you've got to get started now. So one more motherhood and apple pie slide here. What we're seeing are really three key opportunities from a customer service perspective and a customer care perspective. Lowering operating costs. This is an interesting challenge because as we decide how to apply AI, one of the first places typically that we apply AI in the contact center is for the contact center agents. I come from a financial services background, so a lot of the places that I've been working with, they're a little timid about just putting a bot in for their clients. At least over the past few years they have been. So they start internally. But that does leave one of the key benefits of customer self-service off the table, and that is by creating an omni-channel experience that includes a bot on the front end, means that every call that you don't take, that the bot takes, actually is a full savings in terms of that call deflection. Otherwise, you're chasing typical contact center metrics, average handle times, first call resolution, etc. So as we look at this, you need to understand how and when are we going to feel comfortable putting these capabilities in front of our clients. And sooner in the journey, we're seeing people start to put these things out. We're working with a payments company, and they did their research, very technology savvy organization, and they actually chose to go with customer self-service first. But they did so in a very agile fashion. And so the way that they're doing it is they have a particular set of capabilities that they started and trained Watson in. It's actually dispute resolution and refund status. And so they started with that, started very small, and actually are directing people on their website to answer those questions. Amongst the people that get to the bot, 15,000 calls a month are being deflected after work that took from the end of March until the 10th of May in terms of the time that it took them to train those entry-level capabilities. One of the key things that was important there is it wasn't just answering trivia questions. It was actually giving somebody the ability to go in, look something up, and get information in self-serve action. And so what they're challenged with now is how can we give this thing more and more skills, and how much further forward in the customer service contact process can we pull this thing so that they can get to their goal, which is by the end of next year, they want to deflect 300,000 calls per month. And so we're at 15,000 calls now, about 55% of the calls are being deflected that go through this channel. So to get to 300,000 calls, we need more skills, and we need to get to a place where people are getting access to the bot, which is another thing that you need to think about. Are you going to connect the bot in an omni-channel way to your mobile experience, to SMS, which is a fantastic way to engage people with these types of capabilities, especially in certain circumstances. I'm going to show you a demonstration later that's perfect for SMS. But then also, can you put the AI behind your IVR? The ability to connect these technologies to the IVR to actually provide a natural language experience that is trained once and tweaked for the different channels. Train it for the language of SMS, train it for the language of the IVR, train it for the language of the web interface, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's important then to be able to start from that starting point. You have a system that can do something, it can answer questions, it can take action, but then connect it to as many different endpoints as possible. If somebody wants to reach you via Facebook Messenger, you shouldn't have to write that from scratch, because and then be able to do the same thing on SMS, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So look for some of those things. So then, 360-degree view of the customer. Another thing that you can think about from an AI perspective is how can you use AI to gain insights and add facets to that 360-degree view, even before you get to some of the more advanced capabilities in terms of understanding who your customers are. The old way was to create a customer segmentation strategy and then fit your customers into that. With the most entry-level capabilities from a machine learning perspective, you can let the data tell you where the clusters of your customers are. And then you can start to do things like, can I use psycholinguistics to be able to add another factor to this? The words that somebody has chosen to speak to you and tell you something about their personality. So the ability to add that to a customer service profile and be able to understand who somebody is actually lets the person select the segment that they're in as opposed to being shoehorned into a particular segment. And an example I'll use in that case is we used personality to see whether or not we could replace a 5-page questionnaire that one of the life insurance carriers here in the United States had for their prospective customers to be able to determine what segment they were in. We were able to, actually the hardest part of this project wasn't the AI, it was finding a sample size large enough because they wanted to use Twitter of people that tweeted that were also buying life insurance, which is a Venn diagram that barely touches. And but once we got that sample set, we were able to show that just the personality gleaned from the words that these people chose to communicate on Twitter was enough to almost one-for-one match their 4-quadrant customer segmentation. So these types of things are available to you, not just to answer questions, but to understand the answers that you receive and start to gain insights. And one of the key trends we see in this space is, as was already mentioned, firms are embedding Watson and AI technologies into the tools. That's something that you're going to see. Frankly, that's my team's mission, is to work with technology firms to embed these capabilities into their offerings in the marketplace. Because one of the things that we see is having these tools is great, but having a pre-trained tool that already knows something, that captures some capability or unique insight, that's going to be the key thing. And the next step beyond that is going to be insights as a service. The idea that you can go to somebody and they have particular perspective and they're using AI to be able to sell you those insights without you having to collect that data or any of the other things. As long as you understand it, as long as it's explainable, that's a great way to accelerate your journey towards AI as well. Start to look for places where you can gain insights either through your own analysis or find other firms that are using these technologies to find those insights. And that brings me to the last step there, which is start to identify new opportunities. Once you've started to be able to cope with the failures in the customer service channel, then you can start to shift your focus to where are the opportunities embedded in these interactions. When somebody calls and they take the time to get on the phone with us, is it because I forced them to and it's the only way that I'm going to get my cable to work? Or is this an opportunity to deepen a relationship with somebody and find new opportunities for revenue because you're finding new ways to meet their requirements, or to help them understand that there's something that they needed they didn't even understand they needed because your insights are so insightful and you're so open in the way that you're using those insights that they feel a deeper connection with you and they come back to you for more. So motherhood and apple pie is over. Let's talk about what we actually do. So I actually added this. I took this picture a long time ago. Every single one of the Watson facilities in IBM around the world has this somewhere on a wall close to the front door. And we talk about AI, we talk about the backlash, we talk about some of the failures that we've seen in the marketplace, either with AI or just with the way that people are handling personal data and information. And I think back to very early in the Watson days, John Iwata, who was our CMO at the time at IBM, started a big meeting for all the Watson employees with a picture of the Terminator up on the screen. And then he showed a picture of Hal's eye, which if you're an IBMer, we all have a connection to that movie because Hal was really IBM, just one letter off. But he showed that and he said two things. First of all, if this is your context for movies about AI, go see a movie. Terminator's like 35, 40 years old at the time, and 2001 was pushing 50. So that was number one. Number two was IBM and most of the firms in this space are signatories to the same letter that Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking wrote back in 2015 talking about the dangers of AI if we don't take care of it. So trust, and transparency, and an understanding as to your ethical stand and communicating that ethical stand to your clients is going to be a key thing. And within IBM, since the 50s, Thomas Watson Jr. Was our chairman in the 50s through the 70s, said Our machines should be nothing more than tools for expanding the powers of the humans that use them. So that's something that's built into the DNA of the way that we interact with these things. And frankly, there are some really, really cool things that you can do with AI and automation and things like that. But I've met Watson. Watson's not taking over the planet anytime soon. You really need to start to understand, how are you going to empower human beings with these technologies? That's the current state of the art. What are you going to do to make your employees better employees, to give your teams the ability to deal with this massive amount of information that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis and actually gain some value from all this information that they have access to? And how are you going to empower your customers to do the things they want to do with you in the most intuitive way possible, wherever they want to interact with, whether it's to talk with a human being or just give me the answer via SMS. That's what you should be thinking about in terms of use cases with AI. And to this end, we really think about three key things that we're really focused on in terms of the way that we apply this technology. First of all, you can all go out and look at IBM's transparency and ethics standards for AI. But then you can also then look at a couple of key things. One thing on the bottom here, protect your insights. As you look at these types of technologies, who owns the data that you put in? And who owns the AI that gets trained as a result? And so that actually connects, from an IBM perspective, with learns more from less data. If you had to start from scratch every single time, first of all, this stuff would all cost way too much money. And the ability to have a firm like IBM or any of the other firms in this space be able to sell you an AI that doesn't somehow glean information from somebody else's AI is very difficult. But there's a technique called transfer learning that basically takes the solution up to a certain level based on a bunch of different training that's very generic. And then you can layer in a very small amount of data on top of that to allow the AI to adapt to that particular data set. How we do that in reality is the ability, for instance, to train the system to understand natural language, but then give a user interface that allows for a business person to go through documents and train Watson as to what's in that document. Where are the nouns and how are they related to the verbs? I tell my kids that, or I try to tell my kids that sentence diagramming that they're doing in junior high now has a career opportunity. And they told me, Dad, they don't do sentence diagramming anymore. But if you remember sentence diagramming, this is your era right now. If you're really good at it and you remember all that stuff, natural language processing has a lot to do with that in terms of being able to understand the structure of language. But if you're a human being and you can read and you can train using transfer learning the linguistic domain of a particular area, for instance, one of the firms that I work with, Legalmation, they're out of California, and they're an offshoot of they're a legal tech offshoot from a law firm. And what they're training Watson to do is to read a lawsuit as it comes into a law firm or an in-house counsel. It's really for corporations to be able to take that lawsuit and then to help the attorney with that first response. All the questions that you're going to ask back, all the things you're going to say to refute the claims that are in that lawsuit, to initiate that process. That was an 8-hour process. It's now down to 2 minutes. You add in the time to read whatever the system came back with, understand the insights that come with that, and maybe it's 20 minutes. Now, that doesn't say that that attorney isn't involved in that process. It just takes that initial step out of the process so they're not just doing drudgery work, but then they can actually apply their creativity now that they've got this compendium of information they can use. But what Legalmation did with that is they've got their law associates. They sat those law associates down with samples of lawsuits, and they did that process of marking up the documents, where are the entities is what we call them, the nouns, and how do they relate to the different concepts so that the system could understand the language of a slip and fall lawsuit or the various other domains of law that they've taught the system. And then really, like I said at the beginning, reimagine your workflows. These tools in and of themselves are tools. And so you need to think about that business outcome. How are you going to insert these tools into your workflows to come up with a business outcome? None of you are going to be able to go to your boss if you're in that position and convince your boss that we really need to build a bot because bots are cool. It's going to be because it's going to cost less than the contact center, we'll have more capacity in the contact center, or I'm going to find new revenue opportunities based on X, Y, and Z. So that's one of the key things that we focus on. We're focused on customer care today. So the other thing that, frankly, some of our earlier advertising from a Watson perspective really didn't help me in terms of interpreting what Watson really means for people like you. And that is, Watson isn't one grand supercomputer in the sky. In fact, the way that we have accelerated the adoption of AI in the marketplace generally as an industry isn't because AI is new, it's not. But it's the ability to break these things down, pre-train them, apply transfer learning so it can be applied more rapidly. But then also, Jeopardy wasn't just one thing. It was thousands of different algorithms that interpreted those questions in different ways, and then scored the algorithms to be able to come back with its most highly confident answer. And that's another concept that you should think about when you're learning about AI, and that is all of these systems are probabilistic. That other class that you hated in school, statistics, also, this is your era. But then that probabilistic, that's how, if you watch that, IBMers, we all watched it like it was a national holiday. If you look at that, it had a confidence in its answer. And then there was a whole other team that taught Watson how to gamble and play games, and that was a different machine learning challenge in terms of understanding when to answer the question, et cetera. And so this is the catalog of capabilities. I'm not going to go through them all, but it's a bunch of different things. I'm really going to focus on Watson Assistant, which is our conversational platform. But we've got the capability to understand visual inputs, video and still photos, the ability to understand face, metadata, what's in this picture, how many objects are in this picture, et cetera. And then personality, the ability to use psycholinguistics and take a sample of text and either understand the psycholinguistic profile on 52 different points, which is very interesting, and I mentioned it earlier, or tone analyzer, which takes that same science, but then makes it available for a conversation, which conversations are made up of little utterances. And so if I need 3,000 words or 1,000 words to come up with a psycholinguistic profile, I'd have to wait until the end of one conversation or maybe many conversations before I could come up with that. So we applied tone analyzer to understand things like fear, disgust, anger, joy, sadness. You notice I mentioned 4 negative things and 1 positive thing, because this is customer care. We really just care about whether or not they're irritated and need to go to a different channel. But we could do other positive ones too. But the idea is coupling that conversational interface with the ability to understand the actual tone that the words that this person are expressing reveals about their interaction. Make sure that they're in the right channel. It gives you the opportunity to understand a little bit more about that interaction with that client. And then language translation, I know the team's going to talk about that. Speech to text, text to speech, which combines the ability to listen and that ability to understand language in context. That's really the revolution in speech to text across the industry right now, is the ability to apply natural language as opposed to phonetics to speech to text. In the past, they were just trying to figure out the words based on the little pieces of words, phonemes, and put those together. It's still an important part of it, but then to apply natural language to it, to see the system go back and correct itself because the order of words that it had come up with are nonsense in the context of whatever language it's trying to transcribe. So that's another key component we'll talk about. And then the ability to understand a corpus of data is also important from a customer service perspective. So let me take a look at some of these patterns. So if you're looking at a virtual agent, a self-service bot, you're going to be working with our technology we call Watson Assistant. That's a chatbot. I can tell you that I hate the word chatbot because it doesn't really express what these systems can do. I'm starting to give up though. Everybody uses chatbot. But we used to call it conversation, Watson Conversation, for a very specific purpose. Chats, you forget. Conversations actually accomplish something. That's a key thing to remember too. You need to think about how you integrate this system, this conversational front end, with the back end, to be able to look up that account information, to be able to take action, to reset a password, etc. And then that's a conversation as opposed to a chat. One of my very bad old jokes is we played Jeopardy, we won Jeopardy, and they wouldn't let us play Wheel of Fortune, so we had to come up with something else to do with our AI stuff. And but the truth is, nobody's calling your contact center to answer frequently asked questions. They shouldn't be anyway. And they're certainly not calling for trivia questions. You have to take action. So if you're going to do a self-service, think about that. And then the other thing that you need to think about is, okay, what if this doesn't work? Am I going to take this person out of this channel and then pick them up in the contact center out of context and have them start again? Because then the self-service bot has eroded your customer service and your customer satisfaction as opposed to enhanced it. So how do you hand off to a live agent, whether it's in Genesis or Zendesk or you're using Slack or somebody else's platform? How are you going to bring that conversation in context? And then how are you going to enable that customer service agent to use the same system to answer their questions in their language, and then to extend it. And that's Agent Assist. And so Watson Assistant plays here too. Watson Discovery is really for those questions you didn't train. What we see in contact centers is about 80% of calls to a contact center, the answer is no. Your first-tier contact center representatives are acting as intent engines, just like a bot. They're listening to the 1,000 different ways that somebody could ask that they need to reset their password, and they're translating that to an intent. But there's still 20% of those calls that come into that first-tier contact center that the answer isn't no, that research is required. And so that's where long-tail question answering comes in, and that's where discovery comes in, the ability to do what we call a natural language query. And natural language query relies on another AI buzzword technology that you can file away, and that is a knowledge graph. The ability to understand how different concepts are connected across different documents or sources, etc. And a little game you can play to show off your knowledge of what a knowledge graph is on all of our phones. When you're texting in your SMS application, your messaging application, it's going to suggest words to you. That's a knowledge graph based on English, and then your interactions with that particular platform. So if you want to play with your knowledge graph, just go in there and start just picking whatever it suggests the words are that you should choose and see what type of text message you come up with. So that's a knowledge graph. And then Watson Knowledge Studio is a tool that we use to train Watson on linguistic domains. But then the voice agent connects speech to text, that you can talk to the agent as well as type on with your thumbs. And then the ability to connect to things like Salesforce and have it pre-trained to be able to integrate and actually find information and interact with Einstein. Salesforce is an IBM Watson partner, and they've got Einstein, they've got Watson, so they have the right tool for the job. Again, not every tool is going to be applicable for every outcome that's required. Something that's not on here that I want to touch base on is a pattern we call voice of the customer. And that's the ability to take those call transcripts and understand what are people talking about, what is their tone, what's the tone, and what are the things that the agent said. Did that affect the outcome? And look at that over time. Look at that across the brand, look at that across a particular agent, etc., to be able to understand the types of things that are coming in. We use this in marketing, we use this in customer care, and we use this in social media brand reputation. And that's the anecdote I'll tell you. I have a partner called Brandify out of California, and they're in the social media brand reputation and search optimization business. And one of their chains that they work with was a restaurant chain, and they were looking at the negative reviews. And Harvard Business Review looked at this as a study with Travelocity. You know, every single time you respond to a review, you improve your customer service, you improve your retention of those clients, whether it's negative or positive. So there's real value, but the volume of reviews online is skyrocketing. And so being able to keep up with those things is very difficult. So you apply AI to at least triage those things that require the interaction first. So this restaurant chain is getting all these negative reviews from the restaurants. They need to understand why. And we were able to apply natural language to understand that it had to do with cleanliness. That's step one. Then we were able to analyze it further and understand that it came down to the cleanliness of their silverware. And so there's a very specific, actionable insight they can take that really, it's not that difficult. Just do a better job washing dishes. I used to wash dishes in a restaurant too. I had a lot of really lousy jobs. And so, fire me, that would be number one. And but then use those insights to be able to understand how you're interacting. I'm terrible at keeping on time, so I have 10 minutes, so let's see. Watson's really swell, Forrester thinks so. I'll send you the survey if you'd like to see it. So I talked about natural language, I talked about omnichannel. One of the key things that I want to talk about is this idea of intent and some of the other capabilities that you need to think about when you're designing these experiences. And that is really important. It is not enough just to throw all your knowledge into a bot and have the right answers. It has to be well designed. It has to be designed from both a conversational perspective, which is a new domain from the design. The application of conversational design in AI bots is a fairly new territory. And that is, what is the personality of your brand? What is the voice of your brand? What is the voice of your brand in this particular context? In some cases, you're going to be selling with a bot. In other cases, you're going to be a trusted advisor with your bot. If you have the personality of a sales advisor in a bot, that is supposed to be a trusted advisor, it's going to fail. Trying to sell somebody something when you're promising that you're their buddy and you're supposed to be helping them is going to come across as negative. So you need to think about some of these design aspects as well as you think about how you apply these technologies. So intent, that idea of what exactly does this person really mean when they say this? And the lesson that I learned around intent was USAA was one of our first Watson customers in this space, and older technology. But we trained a bot to answer questions as a trusted advisor for soldiers. As they leave the military, they have questions about how do I find a job, how do I transfer my insurance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And USAA, because of their brand, they have a contact center that never sells, never does any of that stuff. They just answer these questions for these soldiers returning from active duty. And so we trained a bot with their customer service agents, and we put it in front of the soldiers, and it was awful. It didn't answer their questions at all, because we had made the mistake of training it on the intent interpretations of the business analysts that understood the space. What they really mean is X, and we trained on what they really mean is, instead of training on whatever the soldier said. That's the difference between understanding the intent and the utterance that connects to that intent. And so, first you start with, this person has, I'm frustrated, I haven't been able to log into your online billing system. This person didn't say password, they may not have even said log in or anything else that you could just use a dictionary to connect to. But that ability to use natural language to translate human being into customer service agent, right there, that's the first step. But then, the ability to understand the other elements of language within that utterance, to be able to understand that they're talking about the online billing system, they're not talking about some other system that there might be a password associated with. And I'll show you some of that too, the ability to chain intents together. Because one of the other very frustrating things in interacting with a brand from a customer service perspective is being forced through a script. Especially rules-based systems, that dialogue system breaks down very quickly if somebody has a squirrel moment and they ask a question that's out of context. And so the ability to understand a digression and the ability then to decide from a design perspective, am I going to drag this person back into this dialogue, or am I going to follow them and chase that squirrel and then wherever they want to go with it? And so that's a design aspect. You need to be able to understand what the person's talking about, what their intent is. And if I say, my kid's sick, I need the day off tomorrow, I'll be back on Thursday, and be able to do that into a system like one of the demos that I'm probably not going to get to because I'm talking too much. But that ability to chain those things together, even if the system is going to walk you through all those steps, it knows that it needs 7 entities to be able to answer that intent. If I give it to you and it identifies all those, then jump forward in the script and say, thanks, it looks like you're going to be back on this date from this date, and thank you very much. If there's anything else I can do for you, great. Instead of saying, okay, I gave you all this information, the first thing it says is, why are you going to be out? Instead of understanding that I said, my child is sick, I need tomorrow off, I'll be back on Thursday. It has all the information I need to register that absence. So that's the idea of entities. And then emotional tone. And like I said, joy, fear, disgust, anger, and sadness. Be able to detect this person's pretty irritated. Now, in this case, from a customer wanting to reset a password, I'd probably still keep them in this channel. It's the easiest channel to resolve that anger effectively for them. It will also save a ton of money for the contact center because you're not taking these useless calls to the contact center when there is a system that can reset that password. But in other cases, you're going to detect that, and you're going to understand, maybe I ought to get this person over into the contact center. And so, then look at the different types of questions that you can take. How do I reset my password? Walk them through the steps, collect that information, follow them wherever they want to go in the conversation. Someone has stolen my credit card. That might be an intent, or I'm thinking about buying a house if you're calling into a bank's customer service agent. Those are situations where they might want to get somebody based on the context coming in with that, because I know that it's Wes Helms, and who cares if he's going to buy a new house, he can't afford a house, so just leave him in the channel. Or this is Bob Jones over here, and he's got $1 million house, and let's see if we can sell him another $1 million house. Those are some of the design decisions, but you can deflect to a human agent. Where's the nearest store? Take action with the third-party system. Go show them a map, show them where that store is, and then maybe connect to your campaign management system from a marketing perspective and make an offer so that they actually go to the store. Or show them that there's another way that they can get their situation resolved to buy the product, etc. So, and then finally at the bottom is those trivia questions, those FAQ questions. That's something that you can also answer with this system. But you're going to find that most times when people ask questions like that, there's some actual action that they want to take. It's more important to give them the ability to take that action and just tell them the answer and then leave it to their devices to go and find the answers themselves. So, a couple of examples. Autodesk started their journey in a very narrow space. They changed the way that they licensed their software. They had engineers answering phones. And so it was taking them almost 2 days to answer the simple steps of what's my license key, how do I apply this license key so I can use my AutoCAD software. And so they took that and they cut it to less than 5 minutes. And they're getting very good response times in terms of that 99% reduction in the amount of time. They're also saving a ton of money because they were answering the phones with engineers because most of their questions that they were getting were very highly complex. And so by getting these calls off of the plates of those engineers, they're saving money and they're letting the engineers actually enjoy their jobs better because no engineer wanted to reset password keys. Bradesco is a firm, you may have seen some of our ads, they're in Brazil. It's one of the reasons that Watson speaks Brazilian Portuguese. But the key thing there is they started in their branches. The first thing that they did was they had a situation, and it's similar across a lot of banks I've found. If you venture into a branch, which most of us don't do anymore, and you ask a banker a question that they don't know the answer to, typically they pick up a call and they talk to a contact center that's meant to answer their questions about policies and procedures. And then usually there's another call center behind them that answers the really tough questions. And all the while, you're standing there in front of them thinking, why didn't I go to the ATM? And so their first step was to train a bot that answers questions and helps research those policy and procedure questions for the bankers so that they can at least make like the ticket agent at the airport instead of getting on the phone in front of you and displaying that they don't know the answers. Now they've got a better customer experience in the branch, and they've since moved to actual customer self-service across their entire range of portfolio of products and the types of interactions they have with their customers. The key thing there is they've gotten 85% accuracy in understanding the written questions that they get through their bots. And so that's that agile process of picking something small, start to learn how to train the system to be able to understand the actual intents that you receive, and then be able to layer on more and more knowledge into these systems. But it is okay to start small and layer on more and more to get to the level of performance that firms like this have seen. And one of the things that we can do within Watson now is we use a range of training techniques with the AI depending on the types of tools that you're working with. One of the things that you can do is completely unsupervised learning. Let this thing learn and then come back with answers. That frankly is how some of these bad news stories in the media have come out, is that the unintended machine learning sometimes has unintended consequences. So for customer service, especially in financial services, you don't want the machine making up answers for you in most cases. So in that case, you use supervised learning. But then how do you get that feedback loop that's so necessary in order to continually train the systems? So we're actually using AI to do things like detect bias in the sample set that we're using to train these systems, or to be able to read the chat logs, to be able to understand what other intents are embedded within these chats. What other questions are people asking that I'm not trained how to do yet, and have Watson come back to you and say, it looks like this is an intent. Train me on how to answer this question, and I'll be able to handle this many calls. That example I said of that payments company at the start of the presentation, that's what we're doing now, is we're going through all of their other call logs to pick the most valuable things that we can train the system to do so we can hit that massive call deflection goal that we have by the end of next year. And that's using AI to train AI, but still maintaining control so that you can control your experience and design those outcomes. RBS, same type of situation. They train the system, they trained it across 200 different knowledge bases. And this is actually one, if you get the copy of this and you go to the case study, you can actually see the video, and it's cool because they're all Scottish, they've got great accents, and they're talking about Watson. But the key thing there is they train Watson with their customer service bankers. And so those bankers have a vested interest in the way that this system is trained. And so their satisfaction's up here. They've got new job opportunities as a result. They also have 2 times more available time to deal with the types of questions that they want to be able to answer to help people meet their financial goals. instead of answering questions like what's my bank balance and things like that. There's many other tools that can be used. But so two things with this is, one, what I've seen in many organizations is these first projects become the locus of a center of competence around AI within the organization, especially conversational AI. So as you think about adopting AI technologies, that's another thing to think about. Who in your organization is going to be responsible for this? And don't think that it just needs to be data scientists and machine learning PhDs. It's going to be your customer service agents. It's going to be the people that interact with this data, that understand this information, and understand what your customers want. And that's going to be one of the things that you can accomplish if you apply the right approach for AI. I think that the EDCI folks are going to actually show a demo of some of the work that they've been doing, and then I will make sure that we have some links so you can go and see some videos of other demos too. Because otherwise, you guys don't get lunch and I keep talking. So,
Great.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wes. I'm glad Wes pointed out too, so I can let you know, we will have the recordings as well as the PowerPoints available. Are we going to send those out email, Michelle, or post?
Yep.
Oh, via email. Okay, so now the moment we've all been waiting for, lunch. So back where we had the muffins, there's going to be sandwiches. So you can head out there, take a break, bring your lunch back in here. Throughout the lunch hour, we will be running 4 different poll questions. So keep your eyes peeled on those. These are more for fun. Yeah. And I just wanted to note that Zendesk has been awesome and an offer to sponsor our lunch. So DJ and his colleague will come up later to talk a little bit more about Zendesk, but they are our lunch sponsor, so thank you to them. I think that's it. So enjoy your lunch, and then we'll reconvene back here probably a little bit before 1, just to go start looking at our demo from EDCI. Thank you, everyone.